Welcome, everybody. This is Heather Riggs with the New England Museum Association, and I just want to welcome you to our August Lunch with NEMA, which is hard to believe that is the end of August already. I just want to welcome everybody and just get the presentation started here. If you guys are on the chat feature, just want to say who you are, where you're coming from, it's over there. That would be great, and also make sure that you guys can hear me, which is a good thing. So you guys are typing away there, which is great. So today we're going to be talking with Ann Black, the Director of Development at the Strawbery Banke Museum, and she'll be talking about membership, the strategic planning, thinking and planning for it. So a little bit about Ann. She is, prior to her appointment at Strawbery Banke, she held executive level positions in development and marketing at Franklin College in Switzerland, University of South Florida, Bard College, and other educational institutions. As a consultant, she specialized in setting up or improving development departments for small nonprofits. So I also want a big shout out to our sponsor today, Museum Trek. You can also find them at our annual conference in November. We will be in Boston, Cambridge this year, which is we're all really excited. Looks like you guys are definitely using the chat feature well there. That's another way that you will be asking Ann questions throughout. If you have any questions at all, please ask in the chat feature, and I will be interrupting Ann and asking those along the way. So we definitely encourage as much participation as possible in that chat feature there. So Ann, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you. Hello, good afternoon from beautiful Portsmouth, where we are enjoying perhaps the last hot day of summer. Heather and I were joking about the last day before snow arrives, and the weather forecast certainly looks that way. I'm glad to have all of you in the chat room at the webinar. I want to tell you up front that this is the first webinar I've ever done, and it's so much different from making a presentation in front of real living people. So bear with me if I stumble from time to time. So my presentation today, the topic is strategic thinking, and I'm going to talk about that as I think it relates to membership. And I'm sure that most of you have an organizational strategic plan in place. What I want to talk about and emphasize and encourage people is to have a strategic plan in place within your department as well. And most of us know the clinical or the academic steps to creating a strategic plan, but I think that we often don't think about strategic thinking and what that really means. And it's something that I encourage people to engage in, not just around the time of doing your strategic plan, but it's something that we engage in all of the time, and I think that it brings a level of creativity to the process that we're engaged in, and I think it's really important. So another way to say it is that strategic thinking is that I think that we get caught up in producing glossy plans and forget to spend the time to improve the quality of the thinking that goes into the plan. So I want us to back up a few steps behind the strategic planning process. So strategic thinking is actually something that people talk about a lot, as much as they talk about strategic planning. There's a whole movement, if you will, especially in the business world, that supports this activity called strategic thinking. And the academic definition of it is on the screen. It's the process of collecting, interpreting, generating, evaluating information and ideas to shape organizational sustainability and competitive advantages. So there are a lot of multisyllabic words in that, of course, because it comes out of an academic study. And the two things that I want to really unpack are organizational sustainability and competitive advantages. I think that those are the two most important issues that drive the work we do in the development office, and that includes membership as well. I'm starting, I don't know about you, but I'm starting to get tired of seeing the word sustainability attached to every single activity known to us. Actually, saw an advertisement or heard an advertisement recently about sustainable people. So it's starting, that word is starting to not make sense anymore. So shaping organizational sustainability to me means how are we going to meet the bottom line, period? How are we going to generate the revenue that is going to keep this institution moving from month to month, from year to year, and as we do the strategic planning process, of course, we're looking out more long term. And competitive advantages, I think that this is a really important phrase for we who are in the museum business, the museum field, to understand, because whether we like it or not, or whether we approach it from this point of view or not, we are in competition with lots and lots of other forms of entertainment or information or knowledge, both in the nonprofit world and in the for-profit world. So we're going to talk a little bit later on in this presentation about really turning outside and looking at what's going on in our immediate world, let's call it the cultural environment, and also in the for-profit environment, because we are competing for hearts and money and long-term affiliation with other institutions. So I think one of the questions that's really important is to ask yourself, what do you want to do? And probably everybody in this webinar would agree with the following points. We all want to increase membership. I think that many of us want to appeal to a new demographic. I come across this time and again, speaking with my colleagues, that there's a great concern about how we as museums and other cultural institutions engage with a younger demographic. And to me, I'm really looking at the 28 to 40-year-old demographic. This is a really important group that we need to work actively with and aggressively to engage with these people. Do you want to acquire new members? I think that probably most of us do a pretty good job of renewing our membership base, and we concentrate a lot of effort and energy on this. Once you get members, they're almost like an annuity, so it's really important to hold on to those you have, but it's also important to put together some strategies about acquiring new members. Stagnant is not good enough. Do you want to add more events to the sorts of things you do? And I think the really important question to look at there is why, what's going to be accomplished. Do you want to attract more corporate sponsors? And I think that this is tied into, it's a membership issue because you are promising to deliver eyes and ears to the corporate sponsors' message. So how you handle membership and how you go after new members is a story that you're going to want to tell to your corporate sponsors. And then the ultimate goal, of course, is to identify new donors. We're always after that, and if we are either acquiring new members and seeing them as potential donors, or even looking at our current membership base and how are you going to turn those folks into donors. I think that's an important question, and it's an important goal. And so when we talk about membership here at Strawbery Bank, we're always talking about what are we doing that engages those members and helps them to reach this tipping point where they understand that they need to do more than just renew their membership every year. And if I'm speaking too quickly, which I tend to do, and especially in this environment where I can't see you, something in the chat room, and please excuse that little pencil that periodically shows up on the screen. I'm trying to figure out how to not make that happen. So, okay, the question is, why think strategically? Why is this so important? And strategic thinking informs the development of strategy, of course. Strategy is about the future, of course, and strategic thinking is about the future as well. The strategic plan is something that we tend to engage in. It's a process that we engage in, and I've seen this way too often in my work, is that people will take about a year to do a strategic plan. They follow a very strict, rigid formula. Mostly it's driven from the top down. The board sees it and they approve of it, and then it gets shelved, rarely, if ever, to be seen again. And sometimes people tend to, people will bring it out every 6 months or every year, but it's not a living document. So go ahead, go through that process, make your strategic plan. But then bring strategic thinking into everything that you do all the time. So in other words, if you're an organization that engages in strategic thinking, you're always thinking about the future. Thinking about the future does not discount the past and the present. You are not always going to, or you're not ever going to say what happened in the past isn't important. In fact, what happens in the past is really important, and really important to informing how you're going to think strategically. We don't operate in a historic vacuum. What you're doing in the present, of course, is really important, but you always want to be thinking about, where am I going to go? How are we going to get there? How are we going to do things a little bit differently down the road? So that's one of the reasons, or those are two of the reasons to think about it. Think about, engage in strategic thinking. I think it's important to, so let's talk about how exactly we do strategic thinking. The first thing that we want to do is we want to, this is a little more nuts and bolts, grounding the conversation a little bit more deeply. We want to look at the competition, and I'm going to encourage you to not look at other museums and cultural institutions unless they're doing something really innovative. Because I don't come out of the museum world, I think it's easier for me to think as a development professional instead of thinking as a museum professional. And though I respect things that are done and thoughts and decisions that are made from a museum perspective, but I think it's really important, especially as you want to go after that younger demographic that we described, if you want to go after women as a really broad and very different demographic group. I don't know if you would really call that demographics, but if you want to look at the audiences that you want to reach in a really exciting and engaging way, I would suggest strongly to look at what other for-profit institutions are doing. I think that we need to look at theme parks. We need to look at ropes courses. We need to look at ski resorts. We need to look at companies and organizations that are going after the demographic groups that you want. And a reason I think to do this is because they're your competition. Other museums and cultural institutions aren't your competition. It's the for-profit people out there who are your competition. And most of those, especially the bigger institutions, spend a lot of money, a lot of resources invested in understanding that group of people who you all want to engage with as well. So I spend a lot of time looking at what those places are doing, how they're doing it, look at their best practices and figuring out what is it that they do that we can bring into our operation to make it bigger and better and stronger. And then you need to think different, as Macintosh or as Apple famously said. I think that think different and just do it, Nike's slogan, are probably the two most referred to slogans or ad campaigns of all time. And so again, I'm asking you to not think like a museum professional. What do you think, there's a lot of brainstorming involved in this, and I think that the, brainstorming, open conversations among your colleagues, among the people in your department, or if you're a really small organization, it might be everyone in your organization. but what would attract new members and engage in existing ones? I think that you're going to answer that question by doing what we talked about on the previous slide, looking around at what other institutions are doing. Ask questions of yourselves, of course. Ask your neighbors, your friends, your vendors, the mailmen, current members of all ages. I ask my banker. I ask the clerk at the convenience store. I ask my dentist. I ask the person who's cutting my hair. I ask my neighbors across the street, what do you think of Strawbery Banke Museum? When was the last time that you were there? How often do you hear about us? If you haven't been there in 5 years, how come you stopped going? Have you been to any events? Which events did you like the most? And this is anecdotal information, but I think it's very valuable and really paints a picture of what local people are experiencing with their engagement in your institution. I'm telling you, don't ask the president, members of the board, or colleagues who've been around for many years, and I don't mean to disrespect anybody on that little list there. But I think that when we get into these kinds of positions where we've got such a great responsibility to deliver to the bottom line, there might be a little bit more of risk aversion to doing anything differently. I think that the deeper and deeper we get into our box, this organization, the longer and longer time we spend there, the less likely we are able to break out of the way we see things. And many of us then over time become very attached to the way that things have always been done. We become attached to the way we ourselves do things. I mean, I'm guilty of it. All of us are guilty of it. And so that is why I suggest going outside to find out what people think of your organization rather than asking the question inside. This is a point in my presentation where if I were in the room with you, I would be saying, does that make sense? And people would either shake their heads or, look at me quizzically, and I would know how you're all taking this. But I can't ask that question, so I'm just going to move on.
People can actually answer in the chat room, so everybody says this is making sense.
Okay, great.
Right now, a couple of you guys. So.
Okay, good. And I just want to make a shout out to Monica Borgatti, who I just noticed is in the chat room. And Monica worked for me at a couple of institutions in the Springfield, Mass area, and just a really fabulous membership and development person. So, hi, Monica. So next, one of the issues that I think we sometimes run into when we're trying to do this kind of work is resistance. People are resistant to change. We touched on that in the last slide. So how do you deal with resistance? I think it's important to try to redirect your fears. I mean, acknowledge that the fears are there, the resistance to change is there, but redirect the fears about new ideas and plans, and talk about threats that could loom larger if your innovation does not come to fruition. So in other words, if we keep doing things the way we have always done them, what are the risks that we face? If we don't figure out ways to innovate and make our organizations more attractive to younger people, what do we stand to lose? And I want to linger there on that question for a little bit. When I first arrived at Strawbery Banke a year ago, the story that I heard from board members and from upper leadership is that Strawbery Banke was supported mostly by people, let's say, age 60 and over, and that the younger generations, anyone younger than 60 years old, did not find history interesting. In fact, they were actually turned off by history. And so there was this sort of defeatist attitude of, what's going to happen to us? What's going to happen to us when this group of people go away? And, at age 60, hopefully, it'll be a long time before we go away. But there was besides the fact that there was a belief that donors and supporters were also in this age group, but those were the people who were members and those were the people who were visiting the institution. So what happens if that's your belief system? That means that you're doing programming that is geared to that demographic. And I'm not saying that there should not be programming geared towards that demographic, but if you believe that that's what's true, that's how your programming is going to take place. And so you're just by default not doing things that might attract a younger demographic, a younger membership. So again, just kind of looking around, one of the things, and again, because I was a new person and I saw Strawbery Bank differently, and spent a lot of time walking around the campus to see who was here, and it is predominantly families who are here, and actually quite a large number of younger people in their 30s are here. Lots of Europeans are here, and the 40 to 50 age group is widely represented. And also keep in the back of your mind that or not in the back of your mind, in the front of your mind, that 60-plus age group, those retiring baby boomers, actually are very lively. They're traveling. They've got resources. They have money. They're interested. They want to learn new things. And so I'm saying to not look at that don't look at the baby boomer demographic and already move them into the, I don't want to sound, again, I don't want to sound disrespectful, but, don't move them, don't expect that their expectations are going to be the same as those of 60 or 70-year-olds 30 years ago, if that makes any sense. So if you are going to, if your fear is that you can't do anything to attract that younger demographic, you need to I think it's important to unpack that, understand that if you don't figure out how to reach that age group, that your ranks are going to get thinned out and you're going to be in trouble in 20 years. So how do you, we'll talk a little bit later in the presentation about strategies that we've undertaken at Strawbery Bank to reach that age group and to also think very strategically and carefully about engaging women of all ages and also thinking separately about how we engage families. Also, once you've decided what steps you want to take, what are the plans that you want to put into place, break those steps down into small ones to accomplish the mission so that people don't feel overwhelmed. Involve a naysayer directly in developing the plan. I think, I'm not speaking specifically about Strawbery Bank, but my experience over the last 30 years has been that those who want to innovate and make change isolate the person who has problems or is resisting making the change, instead of involving that person, really listening and really hearing what their concerns are, and working together, working as a team on moving forward. So it's an attitude of mutual respect where the innovators are respecting the issues that the naysayer has, and the naysayer is respecting the urge and the desire and the need to move forward. And, one of the things that I found out as I've learned to become a better listener, I mean, that's one of my personal and professional goals, is to be a better listener and to really hear what other people are saying instead of to sort of fake listening and then turning around and doing things the way I wanted to from the very beginning anyway. And I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot by really hearing what other people have to say, especially hearing and taking advice from people who've been in this field or in this institution for a long time. I think the other thing that we can do is provide case studies from other organizations. You know, you're out there, you're doing your research, you're looking around, you're looking at what other companies are doing, for-profit companies, you're looking at what your colleagues are doing in other institutions, you're gathering information about why it worked somewhere else and why it can work in your organization. I'm going to stop for a minute and let Heather scan the chat section, see if there are any questions that we want to look at this point.
Yep, there's actually a really good comment, and I think it also ties into the resistance one, but also to the earlier slide, is the question raised is wondering if it was this useful strategy would be to ask the insiders different questions. It keeps them involved and sets the stage for next steps. I mean, for me, that also involves like the naysayers, getting them involved, you know, and stuff like that. So I just thought that was a really good comment to mention on that.
I think that's a really good comment. And again, that goes to thinking differently. So what kinds of questions, what line of thought can you bring to people who've been in your establishment or your organization for a long time? I think that's an excellent way of approaching and integrating and including those people. I also just want to make one comment about involving the boss. I think that this is more relevant in larger institutions. And again, some of it comes from my experience that the boss has a vision of what they think your institution should look like, how things ought to be done, what decisions ought to be made. And sometimes because the responsibility is so they've got such a powerful responsibility that it can be nerve-wracking, let's say, to have some managers come along and say, oh, and we did some planning and we've got some great ideas and we want to come up with some new ways of doing things. So in the beginning, if you can, and again, we're talking about the Membership and Development Office, work amongst yourselves, talk amongst yourselves, do some of this processing, some of this thinking, some of this creative thinking amongst yourselves, then get it down on paper, have it make sense, and bring it to your boss, to your president, to your executive director, so that they see the strategy kind of laid out and they can keep breathing. They don't have to hold their breath because they think that you're going to run renegade on them.
Anne, I do have one more question, and I know this one's going to be a big one that you might be answering later on. Is membership a model for the younger demographic? I understand they don't value loyalty, so why join?
So I think that, again, it's a good question, and I think that you will find answers to that kind of question once you start going outside the nonprofit world to see what branded companies are doing with that group. So they understand that that group is not concerned about loyalty. So how are they messaging those people? You know, this is a really old example, but car buyers, and I think even through my generation, and I'm a baby boomer in my early 60s, so cars were sold through loyalty, you know, through brand loyalty, and that strategy also worked in my parents' generation, but it doesn't work anymore. So how are they selling cars? They're selling them on sex appeal or gadgetry or those kinds of things. So pay attention. And you can't just, and this requires a level of thoughtful commitment, intellectual commitment and energy on your part to really take the time and go out there and look around and study it. And I'm not saying that so if you find out that BMW is selling their car based on sex appeal, let's just use that as an example, that you're going to use that to sell your institution. But, look at it holistically, look at it across the board, and a picture is going to come together for you, and you're going to understand how to develop the language that's going to speak to that generation and appropriately represent your institution. Let me give you an example. So we're working diligently, really hard at Strawbery Bank to reach this age group. So one of the things that we started paying attention to is this age group really loves trivia. And this just came to my attention driving down the road one day and seeing that this bar or restaurant that local people went to, that age group, they have trivia every Thursday night. Then I started looking around on the internet about that a little bit, seeing, yes, indeed, this is something that's really popular, and then talking to my younger colleagues. So they're really into trivia, and they're also into the whole crawl, the pub crawl thing is really important. So how do we do that? How do we take those two things and make them work at Strawbery Bank? So I want to tell you, the older generation amongst my listeners, that once we decided that we wanted to try and make this work at Strawbery Bank, I completely backed out of the process. So we got a couple of younger board members. We went out into the community and found 2 young architects. We went to an organization that promotes young professionals and had their director come onto this committee. And 4 younger people in that age group, the 28 to 40-year-old age group, and we put all of them on a committee and said, go for it. So I was there as a resource for them, but they put this entire program on together. We had our first one last Thursday. It sold out. We could only accommodate 45 people. It sold out. It was within the material was within the constraints of our mission, what we do here, teaching history. But we chose 4 of our historic homes. We looked at the kind of alcohol that people would have been drinking during those time periods. We had local brewers make beer using botanicals harvested from our grounds. Then we had mead in one house. We had cordials in another house. We had wine in another house. And so they tasted, they went into the house, they heard the story of the house. They all ended up at one of our 17th century taverns at the end of the evening, and they played a trivia game. It was wildly successful. They have one now planned in October, one in December. I want to also tell you that the one in October is going to go off campus. So this is a risk that you take. Once you get them on campus, you can't let them off campus because you'll lose them. So it's a risk that we're taking, but the crawl starts at our campus, ends at our campus. It's going to be haunted related, haunted Portsmouth. And we just have to trust that we're doing a really good job of organizing it. They're recognizing the brand. History Crawl, the History Crawl series, because nobody likes their history dry. So we've kind of branded that and, keep reaching out to them through social media, through email, so that they know that this is a Strawbery Bank event. So that's a long description, but I wanted to give you, we're talking sort of in abstract terms, but I wanted to give you some real concrete examples of how you think strategically, what you're paying attention to in your micro and macro environment, how you're bringing that information back to inform your thinking and guiding your planning process to achieve the goal you want, whatever that goal is. That was a lot. So shall we move on?
Yeah, I think that's probably good.
Okay.
We're at 12:35, just to give you.
So one more thing about fear and resistance. Get the fears out in the open, talk about them, innovate around them, and present facts. And sometimes we get so emotionally attached to what we've done in the past, how we do things around here. I see that at Strawbery Bank. And I think that when things start to get emotional, to present facts and logic. when you're doing this kind of thinking and planning, I want to make a gentle reminder, and that is customer centricity. I see this again in many organizations that we work from the inside out. In this environment that we're in today, I don't care if you're talking about boomers or millennials or families or women, you have to be customer centric. And I think that scares museum people a little bit. I've seen a little bit of pushback here at Strawbery Bank with our curator, a fabulous young person, and from our archaeologists, but they're museum people. They're in the field because they love history and they love preservation and they love exploring and knowing about the past. And again, I respect that entirely. So my question to them is, how do we seduce people into coming into a living history museum? How do we use language and images to get them here? And then once they're here, you all are going to be doing your job of interpreting history and laying this all out for them, and let us get them in here, and then you do your job once they're here. I think it's really important to ask the questions, why do customers come to this organization? What value do we provide to them? It's important to think in terms of entertainment, because we're competing for those entertainment dollars. I guarantee you that we are competing for entertainment dollars. And are they going up the road to the ropes course? Are they going out, in particular in my area, are they going out on the gondola? Are they going to a movie? Are they going shopping and for a nice dinner? So what value do we provide to them, understanding that we are in competition with all of those other enterprises in town? What are their needs? Have their needs changed over time? How and why? You have to ask those questions. You have to gather the answers. You have to understand the answers. How have their needs changed, and why have their needs changed? What customer needs do we meet or exceed today? Ask yourself that question, and be hard on yourselves. I think it's really important to push yourself hard against these kinds of issues if you really want to grow in any of the ways that we identified at the beginning of this presentation. You can't let yourself off easily. And who's competing with me to meet the customer needs? I've touched on this over and over again in this presentation, and it's not just other museums. It's the world out there, and you can compete with those folks. You can compete with those folks. I think, again, it's important not to just sort of give up. They've got more money. They've got more resources. They're snazzier and jazzier, and we can't compete with that. It's simply not true. What can we do differently or better to uniquely meet the needs of the customer? How can we be unique? How can we do things in a different way? And are we willing to put customer needs at the center of our decisions and processes? And that's a key question. And if the answer to that question is no, we're in trouble, because we depend on those people, those customers, being interested in, coming to, visiting, buying memberships, making donations to our organization. And so we need to treasure the work that we do and the institution, the museum that we're protecting, but we need to really be able to open ourselves to the fact that what we do is all about other people as well, those customers, those people on the outside world. They've got an investment, they've got ownership of whatever public treasure it is that we as museum people are holding on to and protecting. And then the question, are we willing to change? Are we really willing to change the ways that we do business? And believe me, we are doing business. And if we're not doing business, again, we're going to be in trouble. Next, Take a look in. This is an important part of strategic thinking and strategic planning. Take a look at the experiences you now offer to members. Go back to that word experiences, really important. This is probably an old thought to all of you at this point in time, but we are in the experience business. So what kinds of experiences are we offering? What are the most popular, the most well-attended? This tells us a story. If people are showing up in hordes at 1 o'clock in the afternoon to go on the garden tour, and we only do one garden tour a day, maybe we need to add more garden tours. What demographic group are you currently attracting? Be really careful about answering this question, as I tried to demonstrate or explain to you earlier on. Is your membership stable or growing year over year? Stable is not good enough. It's got to be growing year over year. We can't just keep replacing numbers, like we've got 1,000 members, and if at the end of this year we still have those 1,000 members, we've done well. We haven't done well. It's not good enough. Look at how long you're retaining members. I think this is another really important question. Are people dropping off after 4 years or 5 years? One of the things at Strawbery Bank, and I'm sure this is true with a lot of your organizations, somebody is a member. They're a member for 2 or 3 years, 4 years. They come a couple of times. They come to a couple of events. And then why should they renew their membership? Again, what's in it for them over the long term? And the answer to this question is constant innovation in your programming, constantly adding, changing things up. Don't do the same thing over and over again. Change your events. I'll tell you that we just had a meeting this morning, and because people get really tired over the winter and yet they need things to do, so we're introducing more new programming this winter. We're going to be doing Women and Commerce in 17th and 18th century in the 17th and 18th century in Portsmouth and Strawbery Bank. And this came about because just running across a description of a talk that somebody's giving with the New Hampshire Arts Council about women tavern owners in Portsmouth in the 17th century. See, this is an example of like scanning outward, seeing what's going on out there, grabbing that, it fits our mission, pulling that woman into our conversation, figuring out how we can expand on this beautiful story that beautiful and exciting story that she's going to bring, and voila, you have a new program, something new to talk about, and you're giving yourself new language to go out and tell your story to your members. Look at the future. What do you think the world is going to look like in 3 years or in 5 years? I don't go out much further than that. There was a time when you would do strategic planning and actually look at 10 years out in time. I think that that's a useless exercise these days, given how just. So actually the strategic planning that we do in the development department here at Strawbery Bank is 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, and with the likelihood that the 5-year plan will be meaningless in 5 years. So what we do here is, in the past year, we have developed a strategic plan for the development department. It includes membership, and membership includes renewal and acquisition. It includes the annual fund. It includes looking at this point, we're looking at the possibility of doing an endowment campaign. So we actually do our strategic plan just like the wider organization would do a strategic plan, but we pull that plan out every 3 or 4 months and look at what did we say we were going to do, how did we say we were going to achieve that goal, and making sure that we're implementing all of the things that we said we were going to do. And it's also just a gentle reminder because as the year goes on, you either forget all of that excitement that you had at the beginning of the year, or you kind of lose your way or get distracted and start going down a different path, or things will come to you and it's like, oh, that's really neat. We could do something like that. But the question we say then is, how does that fit into our strategic plan for this year? For instance, the Women in Commerce series, the first question is, go back to the strategic plan for the year and figure out whether or not that really fits in. Looking at the future, again, brainstorm, do some research, go outside of your museum associations, go beyond uh, fundraising or philanthropic associations, and look at what other people are talking about in the for-profit world. If anybody wants some links or addresses to some of the websites or blogs that I regularly visit to keep myself energized and up to date and not as close to the edge as I can possibly get to what innovators and entrepreneurs and strategic thinkers are doing out there in the greater world. And there's a lot of really, really great information to be had. And a lot of these people are doing exactly this. They're looking at the future. They're speculating. It's their job to keep their fingers on that pulse. So they're doing all the work for you. Just go out, connect with them, read them, and be open to that kind of information, bringing it into your organization, especially in the membership and development arena, because we really are doing we're salesmen and we're marketing people, and so, keep connected and stay informed with the ways for-profit people are doing things. Plan and implement, that's another presentation. And I think that probably Heather and BJ have something lined up. That's something that we come back to again and again. However, if anyone has any questions for me, specific questions on planning and implementing, send me an email. And finally, I want to say to you before we open it up to take questions for 10 or 15 minutes, please delight in what you do. Don't ask yourself what keeps you up at night, but ask yourself what gets you out of bed in the morning. I would much rather and encourage the people who work with me and around me to get yourself to a place where you're not worrying, but you're sort of excited and kind of joyful to come in and do this creative stuff, meet your goals. We're meeting and exceeding our monthly membership goals at Strawbery Bank this year. It's the first time that it's ever been done in the history of the museum. And the young woman who's the membership director is so excited and engaged and thrilled, and she's like crunching those numbers every couple of hours throughout the day because the excitement and the thrill of reaching this goal it's just so satisfying. And it changes the environment in which we work. We enjoy ourselves. We value the creative process that all of us bring. We indulge in that creative process, and yet we all still also expect ourselves to deliver. So find the ways to make this a pleasure. So that's my presentation. And any questions?
This is now the time. If you guys do have any random questions at all, please ask them.
And I just saw Rebecca Smith said the museum has to be fun, maybe even a little subversive. Exactly. That's exactly it. Thank you for getting that message. And Rebecca, there's also, I think, to all of you, there's a way to keep your members, those younger members, connected, if not through loyalty in the way that we've always defined loyalty. I think that we might want to look at that word again and see exactly what it means. And we might even want to change the word loyalty, look at engagement as a different word. And so then the question becomes, how do you keep those people continuously engaged with your organization? And I think that it takes a lot of work and energy, and but it's fun and it's really satisfying. So I think engagement, and you need to be interesting. You remember that we're competing for people's attention in a saturated world, and a world that's saturated with all sorts of neat and wonderful things to do. So, you have to constantly be, or as often as you can, renewing and refreshing yourself at the point of contact with your customers.
Laura asked a really good question on
Yeah.
that one.
We have not replaced programming. The things that we've always done that have a steady, loyal audience and following, we're not replacing those things. We might tweak them, but we're not replacing them. Does that answer the question? And, I think that it's also really important. We're starting to segment our messaging so that the fun and subversive language and, that kind of stuff is used with the appropriate demographic. So that's another way to not make your longtime loyal members uncomfortable with the fact that you're doing things down on, at the other end of the continuum.
Do we have any other questions?
Okay, so you have 10 minutes of your lunch hour to rush out and grab a sandwich.
Yep, and I just want to say thank you for giving this presentation and giving of your time to the NEMA membership, because we are a membership organization, talking about that. And I also want to thank everybody for coming today. Appreciate that. And also make sure to join us next September. Oh, God, it's really going to be September. And we'll be talking to Tim Cook, the president of Trek Solver, about making a game of it and using mobile technology that's in your visitor's pocket. And then also I just want to make a big shout out. We be checking your inbox in the next day because NEMA has a really big announcement. And it's about our annual conference.
That's intriguing.
Yeah, no, it's about our annual conference, so we're pretty excited about releasing this information.
And Heather, if I might just jump in for a second and thank everyone who signed up, sat in, listened to my presentation. I appreciate your attention. And I will also get those links to Heather and or BJ. They've got all of your email addresses, and they can just send that information out to everybody.
Yep, and then as a reminder, the PowerPoint presentation will be available on the NEMA website along with the recording of the session, because I know some people like to watch it again or send it off to other people or the ones that weren't able to make it today. So that will be available probably later today or tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you guys in November.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.